You are sitting in a climate-controlled vault at Yale University, white gloves on your hands, a book open in front of you. The parchment is 600 years old, and every page is covered in writing. Neat, confident, flowing script. No crossings out, no corrections, not one. There are drawings of plants that do not exist on Earth. Botanists have compared them to every known species. No match. Star charts that match no known sky. Diagrams of women bathing in green liquid connected by tubes to organs that have no name in anatomy. The illustrations are detailed, methodical, and completely impossible. And the language, if it is a language, has defeated every code breaker, every linguist, every algorithm thrown at it since 1912. The best minds at the National Security Agency failed. Artificial intelligence failed. 6 centuries of human effort, and not a single word has been reliably translated. This is the Voynich Manuscript, and it does not just resist decryption, it ruins the people who try. Emperor Rudolf II of Prague purchased it for 600 gold ducats, convinced it held the secret of eternal life. He lost his throne and died in isolation. In 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich found it hidden in a Jesuit college near Rome and spent the rest of his life chasing a translation. He never got one. In the decades since, senior cryptographers from the National Security Agency have taken their shot. Career linguists have staked their reputations. In 2018, an artificial intelligence algorithm claimed to have cracked the first sentence. The result was reviewed by peers and declared meaningless. Radiocarbon dating at the University of Arizona places the parchment between 1404 and 1438. The material is genuine. The calf skin is genuine. The ink is consistent with the 15th century. The text contains no corrections, not one, across 240 pages. Whatever this book is, whoever wrote it did so without hesitation, in a language or code that 600 years of human intelligence has failed to penetrate. And it is only the first entry in a collection that spans 3,000 years, 4 continents, and one recurring theme. Texts that refuse to be read, tablets that were never meant to be found, and inscriptions that outlasted every empire that tried to silence them. 10 written objects, some are cursed by legend, some cursed the people who touched them, and some seem to have cursed the very idea of understanding itself. The book weighs 75 kilograms. That is not a typo. 75 kilograms of parchment, ink, and wood, roughly the weight of a grown man. It takes 2 people to open it. The pages are nearly a meter tall, and every single one of them was written by the same hand. This is the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible, and it sits today in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, behind glass, in a room kept at precisely 18 degrees Celsius. The legend says a Benedictine monk named Herman the Recluse was sentenced to be walled up alive for breaking his vows. He begged for one chance. Let him write a book containing all human knowledge in a single night. If he succeeded, he would be spared. Somewhere before dawn, realizing the task was impossible, he offered his soul to the devil in exchange for finishing. That is a legend. Here is the fact. Paleographer Michael Gulick, a specialist in medieval handwriting, conducted the most thorough analysis of the codex ever attempted. His conclusion? One scribe wrote the entire book. All 310 leaves. That alone would take an estimated 20 to 30 years of continuous work. And the handwriting does not age. It does not waver. It does not reflect the tremors of illness or the stiffness of a man growing old over decades of labor. It looks the same on page 1 as it does on page 300. Gulick could not explain this. The book required 160 donkey skins to produce. It contains a full Bible, medical treatises, historical chronicles, and one full-page portrait of the devil, the largest such image in all of medieval art. A grinning figure, alone on the page, facing a depiction of the heavenly city on the opposite leaf, as if the two were in conversation. In 1648, Swedish troops looted Prague during the 30 Years' War and carried the codex north as a trophy. Within 50 years, a fire tore through the Swedish Royal Library. The codex survived. It was thrown from a window. Several pages, however, did not survive with it. They are gone, and no record exists of what was written on them. Rumor, and it is only rumor, says those missing pages contained instructions for rituals that the monks themselves had tried to suppress. No evidence supports this, but no evidence contradicts it either, because the pages no longer exist to be examined. What kind of scribe writes for 30 years without his handwriting changing? Recent scholarship by Hugh Houghton at the University of Birmingham, published in 2023, reopened the question of the Codex's internal contradictions. The biblical text inside does not match any single known tradition. It blends Vulgate readings with older translations in ways that suggest the scribe was not copying a single source, but compiling from memory or from multiple manuscripts simultaneously. If true, this was not mere transcription, it was composition. By one man, over decades, without visible fatigue. What was on those missing leaves? And why did the Czech Republic negotiate the temporary return of the book from Sweden in 2007 under security measures that onlookers described as comparable to transporting sensitive nuclear material? Armored vehicles, climate-controlled containers, round-the-clock armed escort. For an object that is, officially, just a very old book. The other Dead Sea Scrolls are made of animal skin, every single one. Parchment, leather, papyrus, fragile things that crumble in your hands. Scroll 3Q15 is made of copper, pure copper, 99.9%. Rolled into a sheet less than a millimeter thick, inscribed with a sharp stylus, and then rolled tight. When archaeologists found it in Cave 3 near Qumran in 1952, it was so brittle with corrosion that nobody could open it. For 4 years, it sat untouched. No tool existed that could unroll corroded copper without destroying it. Then, in 1956, a team at the Manchester Institute of Technology made a decision that still divides scholars. They cut the scroll into 23 horizontal strips with a small circular saw. Each cut destroyed a thin line of text. There was no other option. What they read changed everything and explained nothing. The scroll contains a list, 64 entries. Each one names a location and a quantity of treasure buried there. Gold, silver, incense, sacred vessels. The total weight of precious metals described in the text exceeds 160 tons, more than the known gold reserves of the entire Roman Empire at the time. John Allegro, a scholar at the University of Manchester and the only agnostic on the original translation team, published the first English edition in 1960. He believed the treasure was real, the hidden wealth of the Second Temple, spirited away before the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The academic establishment disagreed, loudly. The numbers were too large, the locations too vague. The toponyms in the text use a form of Hebrew mixed with Greek letters that nobody has fully decoded. Some scholars called it fantasy. Others called it liturgical metaphor, a spiritual inventory of heavenly treasure, not earthly gold. I have spent more hours than I should admit chasing footnotes through Allegro's work and the rebuttals that followed. Some trails lead nowhere. That has never stopped me before. I am constitutionally incapable of abandoning a chase once it starts, and here is what stays with me. The scroll is copper, not parchment, not papyrus. Copper is permanent. Copper is expensive. Nobody engraves a shopping list on copper. Nobody engraves a metaphor on copper. You use copper when you want something to survive centuries, when the message matters more than the messenger. 64 locations, 160 tons. Not one cache has ever been found. In the 1960s, a quiet war broke out between professional archaeologists and black market treasure hunters for access to Allegro's notes and the scroll's unpublished coordinates. The stakes were staggering. If even a fraction of the listed treasure existed, whoever found it first would hold more gold than most central banks. But the locations resist identification. The Hebrew is an unusual dialect, laced with Greek letters whose function, whether abbreviations, numerical codes, or something else entirely, remains debated. Some of the place names refer to landmarks that no longer exist, or possibly never existed outside a liturgical tradition. Either the greatest treasure of the ancient world is still buried under the hills of Judea, or someone went to extraordinary lengths to engrave a lie on the most durable material available. And the copper itself is the argument. You do not spend months inscribing pure metal with a stylus unless you believe the message must survive for a very long time. You have just spent 2 hours at the Roman baths in the city of Aquae Sulis, modern-day Bath, England. The steam is still on your skin. You reach for your cloak on the hook where you left it. It is gone. Someone has stolen your cloak, your good one, the woolen one. You do not go to the police. There is no police. This is the 2nd century. Instead, you walk to the sacred spring of the goddess Sulis Minerva, buy a thin sheet of lead from the temple vendor, and scratch a message into the soft metal with a nail. You ask the goddess to blind the thief, to make their hands rot, to deny them sleep until the cloak is returned. Then you roll the lead tight, walk to the edge of the steaming green pool, and throw it in. This is not a metaphor. This is a legal filing, and you are not alone. Since 1979, archaeologists have pulled over 130 of these lead tablets from the spring at Bath. The Roman Baths Museum now holds the largest single collection of curse tablets in the world, and the collection is recognized by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization as part of its Memory of the World Register. 90% of the curses are about petty theft: stolen cloaks, missing gloves, a pair of sandals. One tablet asks Sulis Minerva to destroy the person who took the author's bathing tunic, and lists 6 suspects by name, just to be thorough. Another requests that the goddess make the thief unable to urinate until the stolen property is returned. The specificity is breathtaking. These are not vague spiritual grievances. These are itemized complaints with named defendants and proposed punishments. I will be honest. I find these more revealing about human nature than most philosophy. People do not reserve their deepest fury for their enemies. They reserve it for whoever stole their favorite coat. The texts are written in vulgar Latin, sometimes backwards, sometimes in mirror script, a deliberate scrambling meant to give the curse power, or perhaps to prevent the wrong person from reading it and redirecting its force. Roger Tomlin, at the Oxford University Roman Inscriptions of Britain project, has spent decades decoding these tablets and published hundreds of transcriptions. The effort is ongoing. Some tablets are still rolled shut. X-ray imaging has revealed text inside, but unrolling them would destroy the lead. So the curses remain sealed, waiting. What did Sulis Minerva think of 130 complaints about missing towels? Were these people genuinely afraid of divine wrath? Or was the spring just the Roman equivalent of a complaint box? And what is written on the tablets that have never been opened? In September 2024, a team from the Orleans Archaeology Service was excavating beneath a former 18th century hospital when they found graves. Roman graves. Men buried in shallow pits, their bones still articulated, their jaws slightly open as if caught mid-sentence. And inside those graves, tucked between the ribs and thigh bones of the dead, they found lead. 21 tablets. Rolled, folded, pressed flat against the bodies of men buried nearly 2,000 years ago. Some were so corroded that the inscriptions had fused with the bone itself, metal and marrow becoming one object, inseparable without destroying both. One tablet had been placed between the legs of the deceased, a specific ritual gesture that scholars interpret as an attempt to strip the dead man of his power, even in the afterlife. The texts are addressed to Mars Regisamus, a Gaulish title meaning the greatest king, a local war god fused with the Roman Mars. The tablets contain names, real names, people who lived in 1st century Orleans, whose feuds were serious enough to follow them into the grave. Most of the text has not been read yet. The tablets are too fragile to unroll. The team is using computed tomography, medical-grade scanners, to read the inscriptions through the metal itself, virtually peeling back each layer without ever touching the lead. This is the first cursed tablet discovery in the Loire region in half a century, and there is one detail that makes the skin tighten. The Roman graves were found beneath an 18th century hospital, a building dedicated to healing, raised directly above a site where people were buried with instruments of harm pressed against their bodies. 2,000 years apart, the same patch of earth served suffering. Whether that is coincidence or something the ground remembers is not a question archaeology can answer. The research continues into 2025. Whatever is written inside those rolls may rewrite what we know about Gaulish religious practice in northern France. Or it may be another set of complaints about stolen sandals. Either way, the dead are still talking. Leave the Roman graves behind. Travel south into the volcanic hills of central France to a thermal spring near Clermont-Ferrand. In 1971, workers draining the ancient Source des Roches at Chamalières pulled something out of the mud alongside 10,000 small wooden figurines, human-shaped carvings, each one an offering, arms raised, faces blank. stacked in layers in the silt like a crowd frozen mid-prayer. Among them, a single lead tablet. Imagine the scene: a thermal spring steaming in the cold air, the smell of sulfur, and beneath the surface, 10,000 silent figures, accumulating over centuries, each one placed there by a hand that wanted something badly enough to carve a body and drown it. 60 words, written in Gaulish, not Latin, not Greek, the language of the Druids, preserved on a surface that was never supposed to survive. The text invokes a god named Maponos, a deity of youth and music in the Celtic pantheon, and asks him to bind a list of named individuals. The key phrase, painstakingly translated by researchers in the Journal of Roman Studies, reads, "I bind them by magic." Let that sink in. This is not a vague spiritual petition. This is a specific, targeted curse with named victims, invoking a specific god using a specific magical formula. And it was deposited in a sacred spring surrounded by 10,000 carved human figures, each one representing someone who came before with their own grievance. Some scholars believe this was not a personal grudge. The names on the tablet may correspond to Roman administrators. If that reading is correct, then what we are looking at is not a private curse. It is political resistance. Druids using their sacred language and their sacred springs to fight an empire they could not defeat with swords. The Bargoin Museum in Clermont-Ferrand keeps the tablet under strict humidity control. Gaulish remains only partially deciphered. Some words on this tablet have no confirmed translation. They sit in the text like locked doors, visible but closed. How many other tablets lie in springs across France, buried in mud that no one has drained? If the Druids were using magic as political warfare, did Rome know? And if Rome knew, was the suppression of Druidic religion purely cultural, or was it, in some sense, military? You do not outlaw a priesthood unless you believe it can do something. Now pay attention. Because the next tablet was not found in a spring, it was found in a grave, and the curse on it was not aimed at Romans or thieves or administrators. It was aimed at other women. In 1983, near the village of l'Hospitalet du Larzac, in the Aveyron department of southern France, archaeologists opened a woman's burial and found 2 lead sheets folded together inside. A nail had been driven through both, not gently. The metal was deformed around the puncture, as if struck with force and urgency. The text is 160 words long, the longest continuous passage in Gaulish ever discovered. Published in the journal Études Celtiques in 1985, the tablets describe a conflict between 2 groups of women. One group, led by a woman named Severa, is cursed to suffer paralysis and silence. The language uses magical titles, terms that have no parallel in any other Celtic document. Researchers call it the Witch War. The tablets were folded, pierced, and placed in a woman's grave, not beside her, on her. The dead woman was the delivery system. The curse was designed to operate from the underworld, to reach across the boundary between the living and the dead, and strike its targets where no counterspell could follow. I have read the published translations twice and the commentary 3 times, and the detail that will not leave me alone is the nail. Folding the lead seals the words, but the nail pins the fate of the target to the corpse. It is not symbolic, it is mechanical. A lock on a door that was never meant to open. What triggered this war between women in 1st century Gaul? The leading theories suggest a dispute over inheritance or a romantic betrayal, but nobody knows. The women named in the curse left no other trace. Severa and her circle vanished from history the moment the lead was nailed shut. Their names survive only because someone hated them enough to write them down. The Miao Museum in southern France keeps the tablets under glass. The nail hole is still visible, and if you look closely, closer than most visitors bother, you can see where the lead cracked under the force of whoever drove it through. Remember the cursed tablets from Bath? The ones from Chamalières? The nail through the lead at Larzac? And the 21 rolls placed between the bones of the dead at Orleans? Stand back and look at the pattern. I have been staring at this particular web of connections for 3 nights straight. Good thing darkness has never been a problem for me. 4 sites, 3 countries, 3 centuries, and every one of them follows the same protocol. Inscribe the curse on lead, invoke a deity by name, deposit the tablet in a sacred or funerary space. This is not coincidence, this is infrastructure. The Roman Empire did not just build roads and aqueducts, it maintained, or inherited, a standardized system of supernatural complaint. Temples were not only places of worship, they were offices, and the gods were customer service. Now step further back, past Rome, past Gaul, past Britain, all the way to the ruins of Pompeii. On the wall of a house belonging to a man named Paquius Proculus, someone carved 5 words arranged in a perfect square. Sa Tor, R-E-P-O. Tenet, O Pura, Rhodas. Read it left to right to left, top to bottom to top. The sentence is the same. The Sator Square, the oldest known magical palindrome. And for nearly 2,000 years, people believed it could trap the devil. The inscription at Pompeii predates Christianity in the region. It was a pagan protective charm. But when the letters are rearranged, they spell Pater Noster, our Father, in the shape of a cross, with the letters A and O left over, Alpha and Omega. Early Christians recognized this. The square became a secret symbol of the faith, hidden in plain sight behind a pagan formula. By the Middle Ages, the Sator Square appeared on church walls, on sword hilts, on amulets worn against plague. In some regions of medieval Germany, priests wrote the words on thin parchment, blessed it, and placed it on the tongue of a person believed to be possessed by demons. The patient swallowed the paper. The spell entered the body. This was not folk medicine practiced in secret, it was endorsed by clergy. The Word of God literally consumed. And in the archives of the Inquisition, the square appears again, this time as evidence. In trial records from the 15th and 16th centuries, possession of a Sator square was cited alongside accusations of necromancy and communion with the devil. The same 5 words that once protected churches were now grounds for execution. The same inscription that priests put on tongues, prosecutors used to light fires. A single inscription, surviving from Pompeii to the Inquisition. Used as a shield by pagans, a password by Christians, a medicine by healers, and a death sentence by prosecutors. 5 words that meant whatever the powerful needed them to mean. What does arepo mean? No one is certain. Probably a Gaulish word for plow, possibly a proper name. The one word in the square that has no translation is the one word that holds the whole structure together. A farmer is plowing a field near Silchester, England, in 1785. His blade catches something. Gold. A ring. Heavy, thick, 25 millimeters in diameter, far too large for any finger. This was made to be worn over a glove. On the band, an engraved image of Venus, and around it, a Latin inscription. Seniciane vivas in De. Senicianus, may you live in God. The Latin is clumsy, the spelling is wrong, but the message is clear. A Christian blessing, carved onto a ring decorated with a pagan goddess. Someone was hedging their bets. The ring ended up in the collection at the Vine, a country house in Hampshire, now managed by the National Trust. It sat there for over a century, a curiosity, nothing more. Then, in 1929, 110 kilometers away, archaeologist Mortimer Wheeler was excavating the ruins of a Roman temple at Lydney Park in Gloucestershire. The temple was dedicated to Nodens, a Celtic healing god. Among the finds, a lead tablet. The tablet reads, "To the god Nodens, Silvianus has lost a ring. He has given half its value to Nodens. Among those who bear the name Senicianus, let none enjoy health until he brings it back to the temple of Nodens." 2 objects, found a century apart, 110 kilometers from each other, and they tell the same story, a story that had been waiting 1,700 years for someone to connect the pieces. Silvianus owned a gold ring. Senicianus stole it. Silvianus went to a temple and cursed the thief by name, offering the god Nodens half the ring's value as a bounty. And Senicianus, the thief, had the ring inscribed with a Christian prayer, hoping a new god could shield him from the old one. Think about that for a moment. A 4th century man wearing stolen gold, desperate enough to engrave a blessing over a curse. Christianity was not yet a century old in Britain. Nodens was ancient. Senicianus was not choosing between gods. He was gambling on which one had more power. Wheeler needed a linguist to study the Nodens inscription. He contacted a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford. The professor's name was John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. There is no diary entry, no letter where Tolkien writes, "This ring inspired my book." But the timeline is striking. Tolkien examined the curse in 1929. He began writing The Hobbit in 1930. A gold ring, a curse, a creature who cannot let it go. Tolkien scholars have debated the connection for decades, and no consensus exists. But the ring is real. The curse is real. And the story they tell, of theft and jealousy and a supernatural bond between an object and its owner, is older than fiction. The ring sits today in a room at the Vine that the National Trust calls simply the Ring Room. You are standing in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum on the island of Crete. Behind armored glass under controlled light sits a disc of fired clay roughly 15 centimeters across. Both sides are stamped with symbols arranged in a spiral that winds from the outer edge toward the center. 45 distinct symbols, pressed into the wet clay with individual stamps before the disc was fired, making this, by every reasonable definition, the oldest example of movable type in human history. 1,500 years before Gutenberg, 3,200 years before the printing press reached Europe. The symbols spiral from the outer rim toward the center, the opposite direction from how most writing systems flow, as if the text were meant to be read inward, drawn toward a point that holds the meaning hostage. The disc was found in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier in a basement storeroom of the Minoan Palace at Phaistos, in a layer of debris from an earthquake. The room had collapsed, the disc was buried. And it stayed buried for roughly 3,600 years. Nobody has read it. The Heraklion Museum does not allow casts to be made of the disc. It does not allow prolonged direct examination. The clay is too fragile, the risk of damage too high. Scholars must work from photographs and the few approved molds created decades ago. The object that might hold the oldest printed text in history is, effectively, sealed behind glass, readable by no one, touchable by no one, owned by time. Not one symbol matches Linear A or Linear B, the two writing systems used on Crete during the same period. The disc is an orphan. It belongs to no known language, no known script, no known tradition. Every attempt at translation has either been debunked or dismissed by the academic mainstream. Louis Godard, one of the foremost scholars of Aegean scripts, titled his study of the disc The Enigma, and that title has proven more accurate with every passing decade. In the 1970s, a handful of skeptics suggested the disc might be a modern forgery, planted by Pernier himself. Chemical analysis of the clay put that theory to rest. The material is genuinely ancient. The disc is real. The symbols are real. The meaning is not. Now recall the Voynich Manuscript from the beginning of this investigation. A book covered in writing that no one can read, with illustrations of things that do not exist, and 0 corrections across 240 pages. The Phaistos Disc has the same signature, 45 symbols stamped with mechanical precision. No errors, no hesitations, no second attempts. Real writing has mistakes. Real language stumbles. A scribe's hand cramps. A stylus slips. The absence of imperfection in both these objects is, to me, more disturbing than the undeciphered text itself. It suggests either a fluency so total that error was impossible, or a system so alien that our definition of error does not apply. 10 texts, 10 locked doors. From a copper scroll listing treasure that nobody can find, to a lead tablet nailing a woman's fate to a corpse. From a 75-kilogram book whose handwriting never ages, to a clay disc whose alphabet belongs to no civilization on Earth. These objects were not meant to be comfortable. They were meant to bind, to hide, to outlast, and to frighten. And the unsettling part is not that we cannot read them. The unsettling part is that after centuries of trying, after cryptographers, theologians, archaeologists, and artificial intelligence have all taken their turn, the texts remain exactly as closed as the day they were written. Language is supposed to be a bridge. These 10 prove it can also be a wall. Which of these 10 disturbs you most, and why? Not which is strangest. Which one, when you sit with it, refuses to let go? Make your case in the comments. The sharpest argument gets pinned. Subscribe. The next investigation has already started. And this time, the texts are not the only things that are cursed.